Have you ever felt undervalued at work? Like you give it your all, blood, sweat, probably several mental breakdowns, and in the end, it means absolutely nothing. Now imagine being the creative mind behind your company's biggest hits. You're a legend, the kind of person they should be building status of, preferably ones that don't get quietly wheeled into storage. And then overnight, that same company tries to erase you. They take your name off of the boxes of your own games, they cancel your most anticipated project, and just to sprinkle some extra salt on the wound, they forbid you from accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award. Because God forbid the person who made the millions gets 5 minutes on a stage. Sounds like a Hollywood thriller, right? Well, it's not. It's a very real story of Hideo Kojima, one of the greatest minds the video game industry has ever produced, and possibly the only man who can make walking simulators feel like religious experiences. Stick around, this is the story of betrayal, corporate backstabbing, and how Kojima didn't just survive being erased. He printed himself back into history in giant cinematic, slow motion letters. It was 2007, the iPhone had just dropped, and the world collectively discovered that you could now play Snake, but more expensively. Mobile games had exploded, cheap to make, low risk, and somehow generating more money than selling gold. Konami, ever the opportunist, saw dollar signs. In 2010, they released Dragon Collection. You know what type of game is this. And on the other side of this rapidly developing cash grab was Hideo Kojima, a man who didn't just make games, he directed them like movies, because he grew up worshipping cinema, like real odor stuff. Long, expensive, emotionally complex, often confusing. The Christopher Nolan of game devs, if Nolan were obsessed with anime, nanomachines, and hiding in cardboard boxes. Kojima had been with Konami for over 20 years, and his productions weren't just ambitious, they were wilding the boring beasts. Metal Gear Solid 4 reportedly cost between 50 and 70 million. Metal Gear Solid 5 over 80 million. That's not a game budget, that's a Marvel movie with worse haircuts. So on one side, a visionary. On the other, executives discovering they could make infinite money by reskinning the same game over and over and selling JPEGs to commuters. There were tensions. To be fair, this wasn't new. Even back in the 80s, Kojima had clashed with the tech teams and sued over his ideas, but now the cracks were becoming very visible. So Konami finds itself at a crossroad. Do we keep bankrolling this man's increasingly wild cinematic fever dreams? Or do we pivot to safe, repetitive, soul-sapping mobile games that print money like a government with no oversight? Because yes, creativity is nice, but profits are nicer. At the time, Kojima seemed untouchable. He was Executive Vice President, a title that sounds made up, but it wasn't. He had near total creative freedom. He was the golden goose, the goose who occasionally made you wait through 40 minutes cutscenes, but still golden. But then something changed. New president took over at Konami, someone far more focused on balance sheets than artistic vision. And while that shift was happening quietly behind the scenes, Kojima was planning a magic trick. One that would fool the entire gaming world. Kojima has always loved messing with his fans' heads, but in 2014, he took that to a whole new psychological warfare level. A mysterious game suddenly appeared on the PlayStation Store, a free horror title called PT, released under a completely unknown studio, 7780s Studio, which, let's be honest, already sounded like a front for something either brilliant or deeply illegal. The game was horrifying, and I don't mean jump scare spooky, I mean existential dread with Halval-induced insanity horrifying. Players found themselves trapped in a looping corridor that slowly unraveled their sanity. Through cryptic sounds, whispered voices, and ambient audio that felt like it wanted to lick your spine. Nobody knew what it was, but it went viral. Massive, millions downloaded it, thousands of sets over its puzzle, and only the truly committed or clinically stubborn managed to solve the final enigma. Then came the reveal. PT was actually a secret announcement for a new Silent Hill game, but not just any Silent Hill game, it was going to be directed by Hideo Kojima, with Guillermo del Toro, yes, actual Oscar-winning fixed-sex filming making Guillermo, and starring Norman Reedus, fresh off grinding his way through The Walking Dead. It was the dream project, AAA horror, visionary minds, a Hollywood actor, and a game engine, the Fox engine. So powerful it could render photorealistic cockroaches, which is apparently a priority when you are Kojima. The Fox engine was built in-house by Kojima Productions and had already powered the last two Metal Gear Solid games. This wasn't just hype, this was a technical and artistic flex. And while the rest of us were collectively losing our minds in excitement, inside Konami, the perfect storm was brewing, and let's just say the people upstairs weren't thrilled that a horror demo had become more beloved than half their actual games. In early 2015, things start getting weird. The kind of weird where you feel like someone's erasing you from the family photo album while you're still alive. Suddenly, Hideo Kojima's name and the Kojima Productions logo started vanishing from Konami's website, from marketing materials, even from the covers of the very games he created. Kojima Productions, now just called Production Department 8. Even the LA branch, previously Kojima Production Studio, was downgraded to Konami Los Angeles Studio. Corporate branding at its finest, removing the artist names from his own studio like it's a typo. And then came the bombshell. In April, Konami dropped the news that hit the gaming world like a punch to the nostalgia gland. Silent Hill was officially cancelled. Fans were stunned, Del Toro was pissed, Norman Reedus probably blinked twice and went back to riding his motorcycle. And just to add insult to psychological injury, they deleted PT from the PlayStation Store. Not delisted, not archived, deleted. A sin gone forever, a move that felt less like corporate policy and more like digital arson. But that was just the outside, that was what we saw. Inside Konami, things were about to get so much worse. Then came the leaks. Japanese media began reporting what was really going on inside the walls of Konami, and it wasn't pretty. We're talking full-blown surveillance state. They installed cameras in the hallways, not for safety, but to monitor employees. Because nothing boosts creativity like being watched like a suspect on parole. Internet access cut, mails restricted. Basically, Kojima team was digitally airlocked, and if the company decided you weren't useful, you didn't just get reassigned, you got punished. Developers were demoted to security guards or janitorial staff, like some kind of dystopian game dev Hunger Games, and Kojima himself, along with his closest directors, downgraded to contractors. Yes, the man behind Metal Gear Solid was now technically a freelancer. Next step, Fiverr. Project budgets were slashed, creative freedom was throttled, and the Phantom Pain, it was pushed out of the door and finished. All chunks of content were cut, and the game had to be split. First, Ground Zeroes in 2014, then the main game in 2015. Basically sold in parts like downloadable regret. Rumors swirled that Konami new execs hated Kojima's rockstar status. Apparently, being adored by millions and having a cult-like fanbase was bad for morale. So the countdown began. December 2015. That's when Kojima's contract would expire. No fireworks, no press release, just a quiet corporate execution. But on October 9th, Kojima left the building for the last time. His team threw him a small, emotionally farewell party, one last salute to a man who redefined their careers. That should have been the end. Bittersweet, yes, but at least dignified. Except Konami had one final act of pettiness up its sleeve, a public humiliation, broadcast live. At the Game Awards, Metal Gear Solid 5, Kojima's final opus at Konami, was nominated and unsurprisingly, it won Best Action Adventure Game. It was supposed to be his moment, a celebration of decades of genius, of sweet stress and cinematics longer than most actual movies. The crowd waited, the music played, and then he didn't show up. Instead, the award was accepted by Kiefer Sutherland, the man who voiced the Snake, which sure, cool moment, but also where the hell was Kojima? The audience was confused, the internet even more so, until Geoff Keighley, host, producer, and longtime Kojima friend, took the mic. Visibly emotional, he dropped the bombshell.
But unfortunately, he was informed by a lawyer representing Konami just recently that he would not be allowed to travel to tonight's awards ceremony to accept any awards.
The man who gave Konami some of its greatest moments in history couldn't even show up to claim a trophy with his name on it. It was like banning Miyamoto from E3 and sending a me in his place. The backlash was immediate, fans were furious, industry peers were stunned. The legend had been silenced, not by failure, but by corporate spite. It was 53, not exactly retirement age. He could have walked away, spent his meals in a beach somewhere, spent time with family, lived quietly. But of course, this is Kojima we're talking about.
I'm back.
Boom! The very next day after his contract with Konami ended, Kojima made his move. Sony dropped a video that sent shockwaves through the industry. Kojima, smiling like a man who had just escaped corporate hell, announced the rebirth of Kojima Productions, this time as an independent studio. Not just that, their first title would be a PlayStation exclusive. Sony handed him something Konami never truly did, total creative freedom. But starting from zero is never easy. Step 1. Funding. Sure, Sony was backing him, but he needed capital of his own. So Kojima had to go to the US for financing, because if there's one thing Americans understand, it's throwing money at a visionary with a mysterious beard. Once the cash was secure, next came the engine. The Fox engine was still locked inside Konami's vault like a kidnapped hostage. He needed a new one, and after months of searching, the answer came from Guerrilla Games. Not only did they offer him the Decima engine, they handed over the entire source code in a little box. No contracts, no NDAs, just a simple gesture of solidarity between artists. Honestly, it was less a business deal and more Studio Ghibli moment. With freedom, 4 loyal team members, and the support of true friends, Kojima began crafting the most personal and bizarre project of his life. A project he kept silent about, he didn't even tell his mother, and tragically, she passed away during development. Later, Kojima would say, "I regret not telling her about Death Stranding. The game's ghosts, fragile, haunting presences became a metaphor for that lingering connection with those we've lost." Death Stranding was born from loneliness and from a worldview forged in childhood, a world where connection, not combat, was the real goal. But let's be honest, how do you pitch that? It's a game where you deliver packages across America with a baby in a jar while avoiding ghosts made of oil? Even his own team was like, "Are you okay?" Death Stranding wasn't your typical action game. The goal was simple: walk, deliver packages, and reconnect a broken, isolated America, all wrapped in a cryptic story starring Hollywood actors. But the real innovation was the social strand system. You played alone, yet saw fruit pins, ladders, and road left by other players, silently helping strangers and creating a strange sense of connection. When it launched in 2019, reactions were mixed. It was weird and unlikely anything else. Then the pandemic hit, and Kojima's message about isolation and connection suddenly felt prophetic. The game's likes and umbilical cord symbolism weren't just quirks, they represented real human connection, reflected even in the logo. By 2023, over 16 million players had experienced it. Kojima had proven his vision right, yet the pandemic also made him question that very message, planting the seed for his next, even more ambitious game. Death Stranding 2 on the Beach dropping on June 26 this year, just in time to remind us all that maybe too much connection isn't exactly the paradise Kojima promised, because, spoiler alert, sometimes being too connected feels like being a puppet on strings. Literally, the new logo's threads look less like bonds and more like a marionette's nightmare. This sequel dives headfirst into the dark side of connection. New slogan, "Should we have connected at all?" Sounds like the kind of existential crisis we all got in 2020, but with better graphics. Of course, Kojima didn't just dial up the gloom and doom. He threw in more optional action, new vehicles, because who doesn't want to deliver packages while driving a motorcycle that looks like it was designed by NASA, and massive dynamic environments spanning places like Australia and South America. Critics, they loved it, nearly hitting a 90 on Metacritic, a probable contender for Game of the Year, because nothing says our season like a walking simulator sequel about emotional baggage and weird babies. And true to form, Kojima sprinkled the game with nods to hit his past masterpieces, Expect Easter eggs from Metal Gear Solid hitting in Death Stranding 2 like tiny cardboard boxes, because what's a Kojima game without a little meta madness? Throughout his career, Hideo Kojima has built some pretty legendary friendships, like with Guillermo del Toro and Norman Reedus, who stuck him through thick, thin, and corporate betrayal. But nothing quite compares to his bond with Geoff Keighley, burned back in the 2000s during an interview. Geoff has admired Kojima not just as an artist, but as a person, the most respected figure at every gaming event, and probably the only one who could keep Kojima's eccentricity in check. Kojima is surrounded by people who are genuinely proud of him, which is why he keeps sneaking them into his games. You know, little Easter eggs of his friends popping up like bonus level. But the ones who probably admire him the most, his community. Kojima's fans aren't just enjoying his games, they see his wild ideas and obsessive attention to detail as a spark that lights up their own projects and creativity. Sure, opinions on Kojima can be wildly divided, but one thing's clear. He seems like a good guy, or at least not that bad. Well, maybe not. And so, the man they tried to erase, the one they publicly humiliated, didn't just come back. He rebuilt an entire universe that makes us question our own reality. Meanwhile, Konami did it alright. They doubled down on mobile games, pachinko machines, and dusted off old franchises to milk nostalgia from their fans. No risky new IPs, no epic 5-year productions, just safe bets and steady cash flow. This, in a way, is the ultimate proof of what Kojima, almost prophetically, seemed to tell his former company during a secret mission in Metal Gear Solid. You can erase the logos, but memories never fade. The last question I have: why Kojima is so obsessed with feet?